For years, it was a shadow war, fought with spies, sanctions, and cyber attacks, a slow, grinding conflict of whispers and sabotage. Diplomats spoke of red lines, of breakout times, of deals that were always just one concession away from success or failure. But beneath the surface of international diplomacy, a different kind of clock was ticking. The intelligence was becoming undeniable. Centrifuges were spinning faster, stockpiles of enriched uranium were growing, and the window to act was closing. The diplomatic track was a dead end. The sanctions were a tourniquet on a severed artery, slowing the bleeding, but not stopping it. A decision was made in the highest echelons of power in Washington and Tel Aviv. The shadow war was about to erupt into the light with a fury the world had never seen. A new doctrine was about to be tested, one built not on attrition or invasion, but on a single, perfectly executed moment of strategic paralysis. They called it Operation Epic Fury.
11:47 p.m. The sky over Tehran doesn't just light up, it shatters. It isn't one missile, it's hundreds, from stealth bombers over the Caspian Sea, from submarines in the Gulf of Oman, from fighter jets you never saw coming, all hitting their targets in the exact same second. This isn't war as you know it. This is a military doctrine called time on target, and it was just used to decapitate an entire nation's defense in the blink of an eye. What you are about to see is a reconstruction of the most complex, synchronized military strike in history.
The first shots of this secret war weren't explosive, they were invisible. To understand how a country's entire defense network can be neutralized before the first bomb falls, you have to understand the invisible battlefield, the electromagnetic spectrum. Modern militaries are built on this spectrum. Radar sees with it, radios talk with it, and missiles are guided by it. Controlling this battlefield is the key to modern warfare. There are two primary weapons here: jamming and spoofing. Jamming is the brute force approach. It's like shouting in a library to drown out all conversation. You pump out so much energy on a specific frequency that the enemy's receiver is simply overwhelmed. But spoofing is far more insidious. It's not about drowning out the signal, it's about replacing it with your own. It's about feeding the enemy a false reality, a sky full of phantom threats, while your real assets move like ghosts. Operation Epic Fury began with the most sophisticated electronic assault ever conceived, turning Iran's greatest defensive strengths into its greatest vulnerabilities.
The primary instrument of this electronic assault was a fleet of U.S. Navy EA-18G Growlers. Don't mistake this for a standard F-18 fighter. The Growler is a beast of a different nature. Where a Super Hornet carries missiles, the Growler carries pods filled with advanced electronic transmitters. For 60 minutes prior to the kinetic strike, these aircraft, flying from the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea, established a high-altitude orbit. They began by mapping Iran's entire integrated air defense system, listening to the specific frequencies of their search and fire control radars. Then they attacked. Using their ALQ-99 tactical jamming system, they targeted the long-range acquisition radars first, the very eyes of the system. They didn't just blind them with noise, they employed advanced deception techniques, inserting hundreds of false targets onto Iranian screens, making it seem like a massive air armada was approaching from the west. This forced Iranian operators to switch on every system they had, revealing their locations and frequencies, which were immediately cataloged and targeted for the next phase of the attack.
While the U.S. Growlers focused on brute force jamming and radar deception, the Israeli component of the electronic attack was even more surgical. Their weapon of choice was the Gulfstream G550, modified into a platform they called the SEMA, Special Electronic Missions Aircraft. These planes are essentially flying intelligence and hacking centers. Flying a parallel orbit to the Growlers, the SEMAs focused not on the radars, but on the communication network that connected them. They employed sophisticated network intrusion techniques, essentially hacking the encrypted links between command and control centers and the missile batteries themselves. They intercepted commands, delayed them, and in some cases injected their own ghost commands into the system. Imagine an Iranian commander ordering a missile battery to target a Phantom aircraft, only for the command to be silently deleted from the network. The result was a state of total confusion. Operators on the ground were seeing a massive attack on their screens, but their systems were not responding correctly. They were isolated, deaf, and fighting shadows. The crown jewels of Iran's air defense were its Russian-made S-300 and domestically produced Bavar 373 systems. These are highly capable, long-range surface-to-air missile systems designed to take down high-altitude bombers and fighter jets. They formed a protective ring around critical sites like Tehran and the nuclear facilities. Taking them down was the primary objective of Wave 1. The combined assault from the Growlers and SEMAs was designed specifically for them. The Growlers focused on the Big Bird acquisition radar, the system that scans the horizon for threats. By flooding it with false targets, they forced the battery commanders to activate their more precise but shorter-range gravestone engagement radars. The moment these powerful radars lit up, their positions and frequencies were instantly pinpointed. The Israeli SEMAs then targeted the data links connecting these radars to the launch vehicles. The effect was catastrophic for the defenders. The operators could see 1,000 threats, but their systems couldn't get a clean lock on any of them. They were a giant, armed to the teeth, but rendered completely blind. With Iran's defense network in a state of digital chaos, the stage was set for the kinetic strike. This is where the time-on-target doctrine comes into play. It is a concept as simple in its goal as it is complex in its execution. To have multiple munitions launched from multiple platforms at multiple times from multiple locations all strike their respective targets at the exact same moment. This isn't about a simple barrage, it's about strategic shock. The goal is to create an instantaneous, system-wide collapse. A single explosion is an incident. 10 explosions are an attack. But hundreds of explosions across an entire country, all within the same second, is a decapitation. It shatters the enemy's ability to assess, to communicate, and to retaliate. Any response is rendered useless because by the time you understand what happened at Target A, Target B through Z have also ceased to exist. It requires unimaginable computational power, factoring in weapon flight times, atmospheric conditions, satellite delays, and the curvature of the Earth. Every weapon is on its own unique clock, all synchronized to a single, final second. Leading the kinetic assault was the B-2 Spirit, the Spearhead. More than 30 hours before the strike time, several of these iconic flying wings lifted off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. Flying a mission that spanned half the globe, refueling multiple times from KC-135 tankers in complete radio silence, they took a northern route, passing over the Arctic. Their stealth characteristics allowed them to penetrate the edges of Russian and other airspaces without detection, approaching Iran from the north over the Caspian Sea, a direction from which a major U.S. strike was least expected.
Their targets were the most hardened and deeply buried command and control bunkers, facilities dug deep into the Zagros Mountains. These were the nerve centers of the Iranian regime. Taking them out first was essential to ensuring a complete collapse of leadership's ability to direct the war. The B-2 wasn't just a bomber, it was a strategic scalpel aimed at the brain of the enemy.
The weapon carried by the B-2 was as specialized as the aircraft itself, the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator. This is a 30,000-pound guided bomb, a monster designed for one purpose: to destroy the most deeply buried targets on Earth. It's less of a bomb and more of a guided steel telephone pole filled with explosives. Upon release from the B-2, it's guided by GPS to its precise target point. It strikes the ground at supersonic speed, its immense kinetic energy and hardened nose cone allowing it to pierce up to 200 feet of earth and 60 feet of reinforced concrete before its fuse detonates. The explosion itself is secondary. The primary effect is a colossal shockwave that travels through the ground, collapsing tunnels, destroying equipment, and creating an earthquake-like event that pulverizes everything inside the bunker. It's the ultimate tool for reaching an enemy who thinks they can hide beneath a mountain. At exactly 23:47:00 hours, these weapons struck the command bunkers, ensuring that the Iranian leadership was completely cut off from their military at the very instant the wider attack began. While the B-2s approached from the north, another key element of the strike was already in position, hidden in the depths of the Gulf of Oman: the U.S. Navy's Ohio-class guided missile submarines. These former ballistic missile submarines were converted to carry a massive payload of up to 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. They are the ultimate stealth platform. For weeks, they had been patrolling silently, completely undetectable, waiting for the signal. Their targets were different from the B-2s. They were tasked with striking coastal infrastructure, naval bases of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, port facilities, and coastal radar sites that the airborne electronic attack might not fully neutralize. The submarine's role is critical to the time-on-target doctrine because its launch platform is mobile and hidden. Launching from the sea provides a different attack vector, complicating any potential defense and ensuring that even if one part of the strike plan fails, other elements can still succeed. They are the unseen assassins of the fleet. The Tomahawk land attack missile is a marvel of engineering. It's a small, subsonic, jet-powered cruise missile that flies low to the ground, guided by an intricate combination of GPS, inertial navigation, and terrain-matching radar. Hours before the designated strike time, the Tomahawks were launched from the submerged submarines. They breached the surface, their wings unfolded, and their jet engines spooled up, beginning a long, pre-programmed journey. They flew nap of the earth profiles, sometimes just 100 feet above the waves and desert, making them incredibly difficult for any surviving radar to detect. Each missile had a unique flight path calculated to bypass suspected air defense locations. Some flew for hours, others for just 30 minutes, depending on the target's location, but every single one was programmed with the same final instruction: arrive at the target coordinates at precisely 23:47:000. These missiles were the broadsword of the operation, wiping out dozens of coastal targets in a single, synchronized blow. The third major attack axis came from the Israeli Air Force, flying their specially modified F-35I, known as the Adir, meaning Mighty One. These are arguably the most advanced fifth-generation fighters on the planet, packed with unique Israeli electronics and weapon systems. Taking off from bases in the Negev desert, the Adirs did not fly around Iran, they flew through it. Exploiting the corridors of confusion created by the electronic warfare assets, their stealth design allowed them to slip past the few remaining isolated pockets of Iranian air defense. Their mission was surgical. They were not hitting large infrastructure targets, but the delicate and critical nodes that connected everything else. Key communication relays, fiber optic network hubs, and the command posts for regional air defense sectors. They were the network killers. By taking out these nodes at the same instant as the larger strikes, they ensured that even if a local commander survived the initial blow, he would have no way of communicating with anyone else to organize a response. Holding this impossibly complex operation together was the unsung hero, the mission planning software. Orchestrating a time-on-target strike of this magnitude is a computational nightmare. You have a B-2 flying for 30 hours at high altitude, a Tomahawk flying for 2 hours at low altitude, and an F-35 flying for 45 minutes at supersonic speeds. Each has a different flight profile, is affected by weather differently, and has different weapon release parameters. A central supercomputer, likely located at U.S. Strategic Command, runs millions of simulations. It uses a program called Joint Mission Planning System, or JMPS, but on a scale never before imagined. It calculates time of launch for every single asset. It deconflicts the flight paths of hundreds of missiles and aircraft to ensure they don't collide. It even models the slight time dilation effects predicted by Einstein's theory of relativity for the GPS satellites that guide the weapons. The entire war plan is essentially a massive four-dimensional math problem, and the solution is that single second, 23:47:00, where all the variables converge to zero. The final and most critical wave of the attack was aimed at the heart of Iran's strategic ambitions, its nuclear program. This was the entire reason for the operation. For 2 decades, the world had watched as Iran built a sophisticated and increasingly threatening nuclear infrastructure. The program was spread across the country, but its soul resided in 2 heavily fortified locations: the enrichment facility at Natanz and the even more secure mountain entombed facility at Fordo. These sites were protected by the thickest concrete, the most advanced air defenses, and layers of secrecy. A conventional bombing campaign would be costly, bloody, and might not even succeed. More importantly, a direct attack that breached containment could create a radiological disaster, poisoning the region for generations. The plan for Wave 3 was therefore not annihilation. It was something far more clever: surgical incapacitation. To appreciate the challenge, you have to understand the targets. The Natanz facility has vast halls located dozens of feet underground, but Fordo is the real fortress. It was built inside a hollowed-out mountain near the city of Qom, under nearly 300 feet of solid rock and concrete. It was designed specifically to be immune to conventional bunker-busting bombs. The entrances are protected by massive blast doors, and it has its own independent power, water, and air supplies. It was built to withstand a direct nuclear attack. This is why the GBU-57 MOPs were not used here. Their purpose is total destruction, which carried the risk of a radioactive leak. A different approach was needed. The goal wasn't to smash the fortress, but to turn it into a prison for the very program it was designed to protect. The planners decided to attack its Achilles heel, its reliance on the outside world for sustained power and access. This delicate task fell to a dedicated squadron of Israeli F-35s. As the main time-on-target strike hit military sites across the country, this squadron focused exclusively on the support infrastructure for the nuclear sites. At 23:47:00, their weapons struck with surgical precision. They didn't hit the main buildings, they hit the external power substations that fed electricity to the sites. They used specialized carbon fiber munitions to short out high-tension power lines, causing grid-wide blackouts. Simultaneously, Other munitions targeted the backup diesel generator facilities. The thousands of high-speed centrifuges spinning inside, which must be kept at a stable temperature and velocity, would have suddenly lost power. The sudden shutdown would cause many of them to crash, destroying themselves and contaminating the entire cascade. It was a strategic attack on the program's metabolism, designed to induce a catastrophic failure from within, without breaching the primary structures. The final piece of the nuclear puzzle was perhaps the most ingenious. To ensure the facilities could not be quickly repaired, another set of specialized munitions was used against the heavily reinforced tunnel entrances of Fordo. These were not traditional explosives. They were advanced thermobaric or specialized penetrating weapons designed to collapse the tunnels themselves. Upon impact, they would detonate with extreme heat and pressure, melting the massive steel blast doors and causing the surrounding rock to collapse inward. The effect is not an explosion, but an entombment. The entrances would be sealed with tons of vitrified rock and molten metal, a plug that would take months, if not years, of dedicated engineering work to clear. The program wasn't just stopped, it was trapped inside its own tomb. This surgical approach aimed to set back Iran's nuclear ambitions by a decade, achieving the strategic goal without the catastrophic consequences of a direct destructive strike. As if the physical assault wasn't enough, at the exact moment of the kinetic strikes, a massive cyber attack was unleashed. This was the fourth, silent wave of the operation. For years, intelligence agencies had been mapping Iran's critical digital infrastructure and planting dormant malware in key systems. At 23:47:00, these digital sleeper cells were activated. The national power grid was targeted, causing blackouts in cities untouched by the bombing, adding to the national chaos. The state-run media's ability to broadcast was crippled, preventing the regime from controlling the narrative. The central banking and financial transaction systems were disrupted, sowing economic panic. This cyber attack was a powerful force multiplier. It amplified the confusion and paralysis caused by the physical strikes, ensuring that every lever of state power, military, political, and economic, was broken simultaneously. It was the final element in achieving total systemic collapse. At 23:47:01, the attack was over. The physical destruction, while immense, was concentrated on specific military and strategic targets. But the strategic destruction was absolute. In a single coordinated blow, a nation's ability to defend itself, to command its forces, to communicate with its leaders, and to pursue its ultimate weapon was functionally erased. In command centers in Tel Aviv and Omaha, analysts watched as the entire Iranian defense network went dark and silent. There was no coordinated response, no retaliatory missile launches. There was only silence. The giant had been felled by 1,000 simultaneous cuts. The operation had been a terrifying success. The world would wake up the next morning to a completely new reality in the Middle East, a reality that had been engineered in secret and executed in a single, perfectly synchronized second. The geopolitical shockwave was immediate and profound. The carefully constructed balance of power in the Middle East, which had defined the region for decades, was shattered overnight. Iran's proxies across the region, from Hezbollah in Lebanon to militias in Iraq, were suddenly cut off from their command and control. Neighboring Sunni Arab states, long fearful of Iranian power, were caught between private relief and public condemnation. Russia and China, Iran's primary strategic allies, were faced with a fait accompli. They could condemn the attack at the United Nations, but they were powerless to reverse it. The United States and Israel had demonstrated a technological and strategic superiority so overwhelming that it redefined the rules of engagement. It was a stark message to the rest of the world.
Conventional armies and air defenses are no longer a credible deterrent against a truly determined and advanced adversary. The age of symmetric warfare was over.
For the Iranian regime, the situation was an impossible dilemma. Their most advanced weapon systems were destroyed. Their command structure was decapitated. Their nuclear program was entombed. What could they do? A full-scale conventional retaliation was suicidal. Their remaining forces were now exposed and vulnerable. Launching their remaining ballistic missiles would invite a second, even more devastating wave of attacks against their cities and economic centers. A campaign of asymmetric terror through their proxies was still possible, but it would now lack the strategic backing of a powerful home state. They had been placed in a state of strategic checkmate. Any move they made would lead to a worse outcome. The attack was designed not just to disarm them, but to leave them with no viable options except to accept the new reality and return to the negotiating table from a position of absolute weakness. The ultimate goal was not war, but the enforcement of a new, non-negotiable strategic reality. Operation Epic Fury, though a fictional reconstruction, represents the terrifying future of warfare. The time-on-target doctrine, when combined with stealth technology, cyber warfare, and advanced artificial intelligence, creates a new paradigm of conflict. Future wars may not be long, drawn-out affairs. They may be decided in the first few seconds. The ability to achieve instantaneous system-wide collapse of an adversary will be the ultimate strategic goal. Drone swarms attacking thousands of targets at once, hypersonic missiles arriving from halfway across the world in minutes, and AI algorithms directing it all faster than any human can react. This is the new landscape. It raises profound questions. How do you deter an attack that is over before you even know it has begun? What is the role of human decision-making in an age of automated, synchronized warfare? The strike on Iran was a glimpse into this future, a future where victory is measured not in months or days, but in a single, perfectly executed second. What do you think is the most significant consequence of an attack like this? Let us know in the comments below.